Good to meet you.
Great to be here. Well, I guess welcome.
Well, no, thank you for having me. I will say this. As far as first impressions go, not only, because we're, for everyone listening on Spotify, just audio only, we are in Alex's campaign headquarters. And not only is it in, like, pretty damn close to the heart of Albuquerque, first of all, door's not locked, so you walk right in. And the first guy I see is the dude running for mayor. So as far as first impressions go, I think you got it pretty down.
I believe in accessibility for all of our leaders. I also believe that we have to live and experience the city that everyone else lives in, right? So I actually live not too many blocks from here. I live on Granite. Okay. And so I've lived there for the past 15 years and seen how our city has changed. And I think it's really important for our leaders to experience the same city that the rest of us do.
I agree. No, trust me, I agree. I do have a couple of issues with Albuquerque that I want to get into with you. I'm going to be very cognizant of your time, but I want to start with, why are you running for mayor in the first place? From San Francisco, right? The Bay Area?
From the Bay Area. I was raised sort of between the Bay and LA.
Okay.
I have family in both. My mom was born in China. I migrated to the Bay Area as a young girl. My dad's Mexican-American, but grew up down in L.A., so he was born in the projects in downtown L.A., raised in East L.A. and Lincoln Heights. Okay. And so I was sort of raised between the two, with family in both places. But yeah, originally a California boy.
Okay, and so moved to Albuquerque about 15 years ago?
More or less. So okay. I met my wife at 19 in college, and she is, a 9th, 10th generation New Mexican.
Right.
And we've
trapped you.
I was always bound to move here and live out my life here. And so we went to college, right? And so 4 years there. Even during college, though, I'd come out here during the summers. She came back to work for an arts education nonprofit called Working Classroom. That used to be here downtown and now is in Uballez. And I remember my first summer in college, 2005. I was working 2 jobs in the Bay, like night shifts, just stocking, at Target. And she called me and she's like, "You gotta come visit." And I was like, "Okay, I guess I gotta go visit." Quit my jobs, bought an Amtrak ticket, and came out here for the summer. And then so we've been in and out of here ever since. But we graduated from college in 2008, law school in 2011, and that's when we moved back here, and we've been here ever since.
So yeah, why run for mayor? I'm always curious about why people get into politics in the first place. You have to be an insane person.
That's true.
To get into politics. And that's coming from somebody who loves politics.
That is one of the requirements.
Yeah, so. I don't know why I like politics so much, but the idea of actually running for it is insane. So why? Because you've been working, you have a deep background in the law enforcement department, worked for the city of Albuquerque for a while, the state of New Mexico a long time. Doing some pretty crazy stuff against the drug cartels, and I know that you got one of the biggest, if not the biggest, like fentanyl bust in the state's history. So you have a history with New Mexico. So why go? Because this is your first bout in politics, like proper politics, right? That's right. So why start with mayor?
So it's the same reason I've made any decision throughout my career, which is how do I use the positions I have to make the biggest positive difference in people's lives. I am the first and only attorney in my family. And so I didn't have a great sense of what that meant or what an attorney does, other than I thought they made money before I went to law school. And then I ended up there and I was like, it turns out that money is not the thing that motivates me. I come from a working class background. My folks, they stocked magazine shelves and they sold newspaper subscriptions. And so, getting into that world of privilege, right, where you're going to school with people who's, generations deep in the Ivy Leagues. Yeah. You learn that maybe money isn't everything, right? Maybe prestige isn't everything. Maybe the reason that we're here, and maybe the reason that someone like me gets to rise from a working class background to being the first attorney in my family, to being the youngest United States attorney in the nation, is because there's something bigger that's being asked of us. And so I picked, I went to Columbia University for law school, it's a very corporate school. Most people there go to big law firms, make lots of money. I chose to come back here and work at the district attorney's office for like $34,000 a year, which is very confusing to my parents, by the way, who are like, you're a lawyer, your lawyers make money, what are you doing?
Right.
What I told them is I'm serving my community, right, in the best way that I can, in the place where I'm most needed. And so that's why Crimes Against Children called to me so much, right? So working really...
Were you working under the ICAC unit?
Yes.
Okay.
When I first started here at the DA's office in the second, it was physical and sexual abuse and murder.
Okay.
And so those are Crimes Against Children unit in Albuquerque Police and ditto other agencies. Throughout my career, I have worked with ICAC. So in the federal side, I continued being a Crime Against Children attorney. And even when I became a United States attorney, I left most of my cases, but the ones that I kept were ones that were crimes against children, and those are primarily ICAC, child pornography type cases.
Right. Improvised Intelligence is sponsored by the amazing people over at Chop Chili. If you've been a long time listener to the podcast, you know that this is my favorite brand of chili here in New Mexico. Pretty much put it on every meal that I can. They've got red chili, green chili. My personal favorite is this blend of the red and the green. I think this stuff is phenomenal. They also have frozen bags of green chili that you can order directly from their website at chopchilico.com. You can also find them in stores around the state of New Mexico at Sprouts, Albertsons, Farmers Country Market, John Brooks, Keller's Farm Store, Lowe's Market. And you can also find them in Albuquerque, Santa Fe, Hobbs, Gallup, Tucumcari, and for all my friends in Texas, they are in El Paso. Again, chopchilico.com. Go get yourself some amazing chili. Now back to the podcast.
And so I've done the full gamut of what child exploitation looks like from the law enforcement side. And for me, what called me to that, because by the way, the crimes against children attorneys get paid the same as every other attorney of similar rank, in the DA's office. And so I didn't pick it because of more pay. I picked it because it was the meaningful job that I could do there. Same thing for becoming United States attorney.
And what year was this when you started working?
2013,
Okay.
maybe. Yeah. And the same thing for when I became U.S. attorney. So the one thing when you become a presidential appointee is that you're going to get fired. Right? That comes with the job.
Yeah.
But I had already settled in my heart for my career as what I wanted to do was retire as a federal prosecutor. I thought it was the best thing you could do. I thought it was the highest level of work, both legally, in the courtroom, but also intellectually as an investigator, right? Because a U.S. attorney, an AUSA, a federal prosecutor is different from an ADA. An ADA, right, is really truly a lawyer, right? So can you hear me?
No, it's perfect.
We good? Okay.
You're good.
Okay.
You're good. Yeah.
Right, an ADA is a lawyer. A law enforcement agency does an investigation. They turn over a box. I think you want me to pause?
No.
Okay.
Keep going. This is called being my own producer.
Love it.
You're good. No, you're good.
Love it. Let me see if I can
No, you're perfect.
tighten this up.
Yeah,
There we
you're
go.
perfect. Right there. Yeah.
All right. And so, an ADA is a lawyer. They get a box of things from a law enforcement agency that they had created during their investigation. And their job is to go prove it in court. As an AUSA, a federal prosecutor, an organized crime investigator, which is what I was, you lead the investigations. So they're long-term, large-scale investigations that delve into criminal enterprises with wiretaps and warrants and undercovers and all of it. And so intellectually, as a lawyer, there's few options that give you that sort of fascinating, proactive work that's not reflecting on facts that are set and researching law that is also set and making an argument to a judge, but instead matching your brain up against some really smart crooks. Yep. And so this was the pinnacle for me, and that's what I thought I was going to retire from. But when the option came up to put my name in for U.S. attorney, I figured that if this was an institution that I loved and a mission that I loved, I should be willing to sacrifice my future in it so that I can make it better. And so that's why I became U.S. attorney. And when I was inevitably fired, which comes for every one of us, I was looking around to figure out exactly how I can serve my community next. Now, I've been a prosecutor my whole career. I could very easily have slipped into a sort of DA or AG role. But the thing that I saw for my 15 years in law enforcement and in our courts here, stateside and federal side, is that while there is a definite and important role for those for criminal justice and for punishment and for consequences, the vast majority of folk who end up in our criminal justice system end up there because of poverty or addiction and mental health. And for me, what I saw was an opportunity, because those are failures on the city side, on the community side.
Well, and that's interesting perspective to have coming from somebody who's dealing with people that aren't in the criminal justice system because of, I mean, okay, are there drug addicts in cartels,
Yes.
child pornography rings? For sure, like obviously for sure. But you're not going to find a huge group of people that are going to claim or deal with mental health issues as a reason why they have their addiction issues or whatever inside that, that gamut of people you're dealing with. You're dealing with hardened criminals. You're dealing with, I mean, I'd imagine at times international rings, right? Whether you're trying to prosecute on both helping with the state and the federal level. So it's an interesting perspective to have of somebody that's going to go into the rehabilitation side of things that you're interested in. So that's just interesting.
You'll see the most senior ranking folks in the cartels, they don't ever touch the drugs. That's why they're hard to get.
Right.
Right. And that's why the focus on long-term investigations is important, because it's easy to wrap up somebody who is mired in addiction. They make mistakes. They're not very good. Right. They are driven by a thing in their brain, a chemical dependence that is bigger than their own volition.
Right.
Right. And that makes it easy to find them. What I was talking about, finding it sort of intellectually fulfilling, to go after people who are in their right mind, who at the end of the day are business people, right, making business decisions.
That's an ugly fact of life, isn't it?
Sure is.
Do people go into the business of, I'm going to open up a Jimmy John's. I'm going to own a Subway. I'm going to sell child porn.
Yeah.
I'm going to deal in human trafficking.
Absolutely.
So what, I am curious about that. During your time dealing with people that are the scum of the earth that you're dealing with on a daily basis, because you're coming out of Colombia, I do want to touch a little bit on the culture change between going to Colombia and coming back to Albuquerque. But getting into that world, what kept you sane?
I am incredibly mission driven. I think nobody leaves that world without intense trauma. One of the things that we did as crimes against children prosecutors, I believe they still do, is whenever a child dies in the city, we go out to the crime scene. Because it's that important that we build a good case and not make any legal mistakes. And so the folks who have chosen this profession, and there are many, in our city who still serve, both on the law enforcement side, the attorney side, I think they lean on each other, honestly. There's a sort of communal understanding of what it means to go through this and experience the worst things, but also the drive of doing what's right for the community. And I think really, for me, one of the most important pieces was just the strength and resilience of children. It's truly amazing how through the darkness, through the worst things, they are persistently optimistic and persistently just full of life and drive for a future. And so you do it for the kids at the end of the day, right?
Yeah, do it for the kids is for the kids something you hear a lot, but that first part is something that you don't hear a lot either. So I'm glad that you touched on that. So you go to Colombia, complete your education, come back to Albuquerque, and being in Albuquerque for the last 15 years, I'm born and raised here, so I've seen the degradation for the last almost 30 that I've been here. But being here, coming back, and then seeing the next 15 years unfold, was there an initial, I guess culture shock is the best way to put it. Was there initial culture shock when you come to Albuquerque from Colombia, and then what have you seen? How have you seen Albuquerque pretty much fall apart over the last 15 years?
Sure. I think the biggest culture shock was moving from New York City to the North Valley, where we lived with my wife's parents for the first 6 months before we bought our house, was the quiet. And so moving from a city, to a place without sirens, without shouting, without people in the streets all night.
There's parts of Albuquerque where you hear that.
Well, this is 15 years ago. What was a culture shock? Now, as you said, our city has changed dramatically. Part of why we picked where we lived was its proximity to downtown, right? We loved the walking piece of living in a big city. We feel like that is a part of having any true major city, is having a thriving city core, a downtown. And part of that is being able to walk. And I was privileged to be able to walk to work for 15 years, right? To the DA's office, which is a couple blocks away, to the U.S. Attorney's office, which is just a little further. And so having that experience was really important to me. But obviously our streets have changed in the past 15 years as well. We saw crime skyrocket, and I think we hit our all-time high for homicides in 2022. We've seen over the past 3 years homelessness double on our streets. And we are all feeling the effects of a community and a city that has not addressed the reasons why people are committing crimes and are on our streets, and instead invested in punitive measures that make it harder for people to get off our streets and haven't solved the problem.
And I would take it a step further and say that both on the city level and the state level, there are incentives to keep people on the street, where there's a lot of, and people can argue that it is trying to help people have when you say basic necessities, the most basic necessities. You could argue that. You could also argue it's an incentive to not get off the streets. Like there's a really good guy on YouTube. His name is. There's a few they've done like these sort of like pseudo documentaries on the war zone, like Andrew Callahan from Channel 5. I don't know if you've ever heard of him.
I haven't seen him.
He's like the definition of guerrilla reporting, and he's really good.
Yeah.
And they go out and they interview people that are in the war zone. And a lot of them will straight up say, like, yeah, I want to stay homeless. I want to stay here. They pay us the blah, 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 blah. So there's certainly a lot of that going on. One point that you brought up earlier that I don't want to lose, you brought up a lot about building a legal case, working with the federal government, working with federal task forces, working with federal law enforcement in general. Obviously, a huge conversation right now is local law enforcement, how they work with ICE,
Absolutely.
how they work with federal government law enforcements. Me personally, I'm still figuring out where I am on the issue, because it's not, nothing about what's going on right now, just in general, is black and white.
Yeah.
There's a lot of wrong and there's a lot of good, but a lot of it's gray.
Yep.
And a lot of it is how the tools are being used. Through your point of view as the mayor, what is the duty of APD in working in conjunction with with ICE? And then what would be your vision for how, I hate to say or use the term how ICE is allowed in Albuquerque, but I guess how would your office and how would your administration work? Because you're going to have to work with ICE. There's no ways around that. How do you? This is sirens.
There they are.
What is your vision for how your office would work with the federal government and specifically ICE?
Yeah, so the first question is, what is APD's responsibility? And here I believe this is what frames all of it for me. Their responsibility, our responsibility as a city and a mayor, is to keep people safe. Right, that's the ground points. And I think it's one that's often lost in discussions about law enforcement, where we go, I think, the step down, which is number of arrests or length of convictions or whatever, metric within the court system. But I think we have to start with keeping people safe, and I think that frames the rest of the discussion. I'm the only candidate who's done any work in immigration, right? I supervised the office that did criminal immigration enforcement. What I know from doing that, and as well as other enforcement, right? And so, as you mentioned, U.S. Attorney has task forces that has APD, BCSO, state police working in conjunction with FBI, DEA, ATF, and this is an important force multiplier. When we're talking about dealing with crime, there they are. We're talking about dealing with crime on our streets, because we have crime on our streets, right? And so the mayor's made the point that violent crime has fallen since 2022. But 2022 was an all-time high. So over the past 10 years... Yeah,
it was an all-time high, but it's also like, well, how are you reporting? Like,
right. It's a mix of both. Yes.
That's the second part of a lot of these equations that people conveniently leave out.
Right.
It's like, well, how are you pulling your data? Oh, you're not pulling data.
Yeah.
Oh, we've stopped reporting crimes. Well, no shit, it's going to go down.
It's curious to also see the little asterisk on our crime reporting for homicides, which says does not include justifiable homicides. And sure, legally that means something, but a justifiable homicide is still a homicide.
Right.
It's still a situation where someone was in fear for their life and had to kill somebody else.
Yeah.
But that's still bad.
Yeah.
Right. And so not including those in our homicide reporting doesn't give the people the full picture. But I think, for thinking about those crime stats, what they tell me is that we actually need to focus very strategically and very surgically on those people who are committing serious crimes in our community, because they are happening, right? And part of deterrence for making the criminal justice system work how it's supposed to is ensuring that we are solving these crimes quickly and that we're delivering swift and certain justice to those people who are doing it, right? My problem with the current approach on the federal side is that's not where they're focusing their resources. We now know that the FBI is focusing a large number of its resources on immigration enforcement. We know from the stats from ICE, the number of people who have been arrested, detained, and removed, overwhelmingly, I think the stat I saw was 70%, have no criminal history. And when we're using law enforcement resources to go after people with no criminal history, right, it's analogous to saying, hey, we had 100 homicides this year, but instead of investigating those, we're going to go give parking tickets.
Yeah.
It's silly.
I agree. And because I voted for Trump this last go around. I sat the last election out, or the previous election out to that one. And hearing, because obviously the main speaking point for ICE has been Homan. And hearing him speak, it's like, I understand the logic where it's like, okay, if you're going after violent, illegal immigrants, and you happen to find people that are also illegal immigrants, you're going to deport them as well. I understand the logic, but that's only on the pretext that you are going after violent criminals. That's where that's acceptable. But you're right. If you're only going after people with no criminal history, yes, I understand that definitionally they've broken the law by coming here illegally. I get that.
Sure.
But there are bigger problems.
That's 100% true.
There are bigger fucking problems here.
We have a lot to deal with, and really, so thinking about exactly that, when I was United States Attorney, that was our policy, which was we will use criminal immigration enforcement when there's a demonstrable threat to the United States, right? Be it multiple domestic violences, multiple DWIs, drug trafficking, whatever, you name it.
Right.
But we're going to use these statutes and our criminal investigative resources when they protect the people of the United States. Because if we're not doing that, then we're letting those people go, right? Because turns out, like if you're a high-level drug trafficker, you're not easy to catch. But if you're a mom who's undocumented sitting in a pickup line at your kid's school, you are. And so by picking the latter over the former, we're making all of us less safe.
I agree. And I think a big issue with that, too, is they're focusing on quotas over, it's the quantity over quality. Yep. That's a really ugly way to put it, but I think that's the best analogy for that. But going back to your vision for how APD would work with ICE, what does that look like in practice? I think a lot of people, they have an idea of how it looks like when local law enforcement has to work with the federal guys, but in practice, what does that look like to you?
Yeah, and so I think the worry I have here is that enforcement is not the only component that's important to public safety. Trust of the people is important too, right? So as a prosecutor, I know that our cases, sometimes our most difficult cases, our crimes against children cases, our domestic violence cases, right? The no witness cases, but the victim,
right,
depend on the bravery of a victim or a witness who's able to pick up the phone and say, I'm going to call the police to make my family safe. Right. And if there isn't that trust, because people are seeing what has flooded our social media of just what I described, moms being pulled out of cars and pickup lines, they're not going to call for help when they need it. And that also is going to make us less safe. And so the manner in which federal enforcement, period, is occurring now is breaking the trust of the community in law enforcement, that it'll be applied fairly and that it'll be applied to those who are committing serious crimes. That's my major concern with us working with the federal government right now, right? Because it is our job, it's APD's job, to be the most trusted number in the city, right? Anybody should feel absolutely free and welcome to call for help when they need it. And if they don't, we are making everyone less safe.
I agree. And I think one of the most important parts of that you just explained is there needs to be an expedited response, not just to the physical call itself, but to the community. I'm sure you saw it this past week. There's a lot of misinformation going around about a body that was found hanging. Everything from it was a lynching to this guy was in the woods, and it turned out that wasn't true. And then APD took a long time to respond to that. I get that they have to get their facts right first. I get that, but we're in 2025. We all have smartphones.
Yes.
We all have computers. And the idea that, and I know that, and I do want to get this in a little bit. I know that you're running, and that's what I love about your website, by the way, is that you have a full layout of the investigation and all the records you've been asking for about Mayor Keller and the, let's just say, alleged corruption in his administration. The idea that it's going to take forever for a records department to pull records. You're telling me that none of this is digitized?
Right.
What are you on the Dewey Decimal System? Do you have to go all the way back to your records and, finger through it? Like, that's insane. But I know a lot of what your campaign is seeking right now is explaining that you're bringing transparency to the city. Let's just take, for example, this viral story that's going on in Albuquerque right now.
Yeah.
Let's say you were in power. How are you handling this so that a lot of misinformation doesn't go out? It doesn't go out. A lot of rumors and theories and basically conspiracies going around.
Yeah.
How do you handle that?
I'll start by saying I'm not familiar. I mean, I know which one you're talking about. I'm not familiar with the specific facts.
Yeah.
And so I'm just going to speak from my experience
Yeah,
and
fair
conjecture on it, right? Because I think there is a lot of things being said about it.
Yeah. Fair enough.
And so I want to be clear that I'm not speaking from facts. But what I know is first of all, we need to dedicate enough resources to pursue these investigations whenever there is a dead body, to make sure that we can assure the public that we've done everything we can. Right. That's why, as a crimes against children prosecutor, whether or not we knew there was a crime, whether or not it was a homicide, we still went out whenever a kid died, was because it was that important, right? That we do it right. And so on the front end is from an investigative point, we have to make sure we're giving APD enough resources, right? Both in terms of the people, the time, and the technology to get it right. The second piece is what you're talking about, which is transparency, which is also important. As a United States Attorney, I stood up we launched the first national missing and murdered Indigenous persons program. And that was due in large part to a community outcry saying, what is happening with these cases, right? There's hundreds of these and no one ever follows up, right?
Hardly anybody even starts those.
That's right.
That is probably one of the biggest demographics of people that go missing. Let's just blanket term it, go missing. And nothing gets done about it.
And so for us, we launched the first statewide database as well here in New Mexico of all of those cases of missing and murdered Indigenous folk, so that none of them would fall through the cracks. And we dedicated staff in our office, too, to track those, even though it's not a traditional, the missing, right, is not a traditional criminal investigation, right, because it could be totally normal reasons. But we still dedicated resources to investigating missing and murdered Indigenous people's cases, because it's important for us as a government and institution to assure the people, the victims, and the survivors that they will receive the same level of importance and attention as everyone else, and that they will also receive some sort of finality or answers in what happened to their loved one. Yep. The same must be true of APD. Right? They have to have leadership who takes responsibility both for creating quality investigations, but also for informing the public and making sure that there aren't people who find out a year later that their loved one was killed. Right? And so that is part of the missing link here. I was at a forum yesterday, I want to say, with the mayor, where he was asked a question about this and responded that it was OMI's fault because they made the designation of suicide. And as a prosecutor, I know when you come on a scene, determining whether it's suspicious or not is not up to OMI.
And define for people what OMI is.
The office, the mayor blamed the Office of Medical Investigator. They are the people who receive the body. They do a forensic investigation on, in their labs, make determinations and recommendations about things they see in tox screens, for example, or ligature marks, or whatever it is, about their determination whether it's a homicide or a suicide or unattended death, right? So they make a determination. But oftentimes, I'll tell you, as someone who's prosecuted many of these homicide cases, the determination is based on the information that they have. Sometimes maybe that's only a body. But what informs their investigation is the information brought from the investigation, right? Brought from the law enforcement side to help them understand exactly what happened.
It's assuming they're doing an investigation.
Correct. And so I prosecuted a guy who was killed with a guy who killed someone else with a hot shot of heroin, right? And so if you had just taken the body of someone who'd overdosed to OMI, they would say, well, this man overdosed, right? But if you have an investigation that goes and interviews the people and figures out who was in the house and what did they see and what was the circumstances around it, know who gave him that syringe when he was blackout drunk, then you build a case for homicide. And so you have to be able to do both. And But I think really for me, the most important thing is as mayor or police chief, you don't get to say it's not my fault that we didn't do a complete investigation.
Yeah, when public safety is your top priority.
Right.
Yeah, you don't get to say stuff like that. I would completely agree. And to your point with that case I was just talking about, they because the body was found a year ago.
Yeah.
And they didn't reach out to any family. They didn't do any kind of investigation. They said, all right, homeless guy dead, suicide, and moved on from it.
Right.
And look, they could have done the investigation. Maybe that was the case, and it probably is the case. But that doesn't excuse the fact that you need to do an investigation.
Right. Yeah, I want to be clear. Like, I'm not I don't
Right.
know whether, I haven't seen the documents. I
Right,
don't know
yeah.
whether an investigation occurred here, but I'm saying that this is important.
But it's just insane
Yeah.
that, the idea that you wouldn't at least do a bare minimum contact next of kin,
Right.
research who next. You can look up public records on anybody right now. It's not hard.
Everyone deserves the same basic dignity, even in
Right.
death.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. So moving to the homelessness issue in Albuquerque, just like everything else we've been talking about, it's skyrocketed over the last 15 years since you've been here permanently. To a lot of people, myself included, it's looking like a problem that you not only need the conjunction of a mayor and a governor, you almost need the federal level help. The amount of money that it's going to take and the amount of money that's been spent on rehabilitation, they're just really, outside looking in, it just looks like really, really bad Band-Aid solutions.
Yes.
You have the Gateway Center, which I know you've been opening investigation about, due to the asbestos issues. Even just from the ground up, that's been a failure. Tiny Homes was a failure. And then the new one they just opened, there's the Gateway building, and there's that new Gateway housing thing that they've set up, and that doesn't seem to be doing very well. Just from your point of view, where do you even start with the homeless issue?
Yeah. So we have models nationwide from cities who have been highly effective at addressing it. And the thing that we have to understand here is there is a divide between the value maybe, or the theory, which is we actually need to treat the medical issues of mental health and addiction as the medical issues that they are, and the implementation or lack thereof that we've seen on the city side. So we've spent over $100 million in the Gateway Center, right? And we are not getting dollar for dollar the value,
staggering number.
the value we ought to be getting out of $100 million. The number of houses we could have built for $100 million, right? And so what I know is that there were experts who were consulting, and there was community who was consulting on this effort before it was built, before the building was even bought. And they gave the solutions, which is care, right? Which is housing, which is we needed multiple gateways around the city, all of them self-contained, so we sort of spread the burden across the city. And also we needed transitional housing so that there wasn't one, acknowledging that there is not one building solution. You actually have to help people get off of the streets, not just house them for one night. We didn't follow that advice. Instead, we spent $15 million to buy the old Loveless building.
And when did this consulting happen?
Before it was built.
Okay, so this
right,
is about
and so this was
2019, 2020-ish?
20, yeah, I think that's right.
Like right around when the pandemic was happening?
I think that's right.
Okay.
Yeah, and there's a lot of community engagement, and there was a lot of research, and frankly, a lot of the solutions that exist as written by very smart people who've done studies in other cities about how these things work, right? I think a lot about Miami, which has a model called the sequential intercept model. It's integrated into the criminal justice system, and it's a way that they've successfully used to remove people suffering from serious mental illness and addiction from the criminal justice system, but actually turn their lives around, right? Actually connect them with the services, the support, and the housing they need to get off the streets permanently, right? And so we have these solutions and these models that we can follow, but instead of following them, what we do is we've invested in big buildings and big ribbon cuttings.
Yep.
Right, and poured tons of money that we didn't have to waste into them, resulting in where we are now, which is we've spent a lot of money not fixing the problem.
No, I agree, and I think a lot of this has been done as just Band-Aid solutions, and it's just an assumption, but just looking at the way the current administration has been handling it for the last 8 years, I don't think there's a real emphasis. I think there's both because of just ignorance on their part and a political conversation where they're focusing too much, and I could be wrong, but they're focusing too much on the idea that, well, because yes, homeless people are humans and they need to be treated with respect, and they deserve basic dignity, and they deserve the ability to reform, and that should be offered to them. But the idea that it's gotten to the point now where it's like they're full on allowing people to live on the streets, and they're doing nothing about it, and the most they do about it is they just try to move them to different places around the city.
Yeah.
With complete disregard for the rest of Albuquerque that's trying to, quite frankly, not live around homeless people, because homeless people being crime, drugs, disease, it's just a fact. And I just, from speaking with my friends and other people on the podcast when this issue comes up, a lot of people in Albuquerque feel that there is no respect from the city government towards the everyday citizen that's trying to live their life, pay their bills, feed their families, keep their families out of harm's way. And you can't even say that homeless people are giving preference, because there is no real preference, but it's like it's just being allowed to happen. And going back to the idea of transparency, there needs to be a strong statement from the mayor's office saying that we're going to do something quantitative to fix this. Not just buying buildings. Like I said, ribbon cutting, a bunch of just bullshit that they're doing. I know there's a lot of conversations going on right now about the giant building off of San Mateo and Central and that part of the war zone. What do you when you look at a giant building like that that's not being used, just from your perspective, what could that building be used for in benefit to the city? Not just for maybe fixing the homeless problem, but that's a giant piece of real estate that's not being utilized. And it's a waste. So what could you be using that for under the mayor's office? And I understand that there's a lot of red tape you have to get through. The budget for the city is not huge. You did mention something in an interview that I listened to about us having a trust fund, the second biggest trust fund.
So there's two things here. The city budget has increased by about 50% over the past 8 years.
Okay.
So it was $900 million when Keller came into office. It's now $1.4 billion.
I take back what I just said. We have the budget. You don't hear that a lot.
Our budget's very opaque. If you go and read it like I have, you see that there's a lot of numbers, but not a lot of deliverables. Right? There's not a lot of comparisons. We hear the number ACS has responded to over 100,000 calls for service, which is great, but that's not over what time period? It's over 3 years, right? Since its inception. And if you look at the number of calls for service for APD and the number of calls for service for APD that are non-criminal, right? Are they doing the coverage that we are claiming that they are? They're not. Right. And so that's part of the problem with how our budget is not transparent. I would also, what you're talking about is we have a trust fund here in New Mexico. Now, this is not under the mayor's control, obviously. You'd have to go up to the legislature and get the governor to buy in. But it's like $64 billion. It's the second biggest in the United States.
What?
Right? We're saving this massive pile of gold for a rainy day, and it is storming out there.
So I was going to say, explain to people, I think this is worth time, because you don't hear this a lot. I mean, you see our own governor going on a 60 Minutes with I think it was the governor of Utah, that she went on a 60 Minutes with, flat out saying that New Mexico is one of the poorest states in the country.
Our people are poor. Our government has the money.
So explain to people what this trust fund is, what it could be used for, and then how can the mayor's office work in conjunction with the governor's office?
Yeah. And so I think this is a moment, because we have those resources, where we can build the city and state that works for everybody here. Because when we feel like a small and poor city, it's not because the resources don't exist in New Mexico. It's because we're not using them for the people who live here, right? We are in a crisis time, right? We see it on our streets every day. We feel it when we walk, and we feel it when we drive, that our streets are not safe, that our families are in crisis, that there's a lack of good paying jobs, that people can't afford to live in their houses and apartments, that they don't have childcare, that they don't have health care. And to know that we have the money to fix it and to build the systems that take care of people and still choose not to. That's the real heartbreak of looking at how we've been running this city for so long.
So But how do you vision you as a mayor and also your office
Yeah.
working in conjunction with the governor to get some of those to allocate resources?
Yeah, we'd be up there lobbying for resources being allocated to any number of things that we need here. And for me, really, all of this, if you think about the vast majority of crime and the vast majority of homelessness, it's economic, right? These are poverty driven. And if we can support basic things for people so that they are not scared of getting kicked out of their houses, like rental assistance, if we can afford basic things for people like improving their houses that they own, for maybe thinking about our seniors, so they don't get red tagged and they don't get kicked out into the streets and their houses get bulldozed. Right? If we can think about having, working and mediating between landlords and tenants, because the most expensive and lose-lose situation for everyone is an eviction, right? The landlord doesn't benefit from it, nor does the person evicted. So if we can mediate and fix the problem, whatever it is, from the city side with the money that we have, then it is a net win for us as a community. And so I think a lot about bigger issues as well. Universal child care, think about health care. All right, health care here, we have, because doctors have been fleeing our state, it's impossible for us to, even those of us with insurance, to access reasonable health care. I haven't seen a doctor in a few years.
Hey, same.
Right? And to think that we have the opportunity to build these systems here, to really incentivize them in a way of, and so my vision of government is that government is not a business, right? We're not in the business of stacking money, keeping money, or having a financial exchange with people when we spend money. We're in the business of making our cities and our states thrive. So if that is, right, I mean, you think cost benefit, the $10,000 for a new roof for a senior so they don't get kicked out, that's a relatively small cost versus the rest of their lifetime on the streets and ER bills and police response and solid waste and, everything else. And just on top of all of it, the basic humanity, right, of having one of our neighbors who are not taken care of, who has given their whole life to living in this city and its community, and now at the end of their life, we are not taking care of them, right, is a tragedy. And so, yes, as mayor, you go up and lobby. You go ask for money. You propose programs. And why, I think your first question, which I never answered, was why I'm running for mayor of Albuquerque, is where Albuquerque goes, the state goes. The solutions that we build here in this largest metropolitan area are solutions that will work for everybody, right? We are already bearing the brunt of the state. There are cities who bus homeless here into Albuquerque. And so, yes, they should pay their fair share for us dealing with their citizens coming here. And
I'm glad you said that. 'Cause a lot of people are afraid to say that whether they're running for office or not. It's an ugly reality of Albuquerque right now.
Yeah. But look, it's time for us to be the big brother, right? It's time for us to step up and say, no, we're going to actually solve the problems. And we will bring the rest of New Mexico along with us because we have the infrastructure and the people and the resources. And if we build it here, we can fix it for the rest of the state.
Talking about putting money into the city, I've been always of the mindset that, we have APD is a mess right now. I've heard you say in many interviews before, and I've had a lot of other candidates on the podcast say that Medina's gone. And so I don't even really want to touch on that. That seems to be a given, just because the leadership is just fractured, to say the least. But as far as the money component goes, I've always been of the mindset of if you want to fix a police department, once you get the good leadership in there, you give them the funding to be able to train properly, have the good equipment, so on and so forth. Hire new recruits, give incentives for people to want to join the police force, right? Because the more recruits you have, the less overtime you're not only paying for, but the less overtime the police have to work.
Yep.
They don't get burnt out. They don't make mistakes on the job.
Yep.
Mental health is better in theory, so on and so forth. What is your vision for APD, and how do you work to reform that department?
So I view really all of the issues as interconnected, right? And I think that's important for a mayor to see it sort of citywide and not just as this department, and this department. Because we have some of the highest pay for police officers in the state here. And yet we are struggling to attract police officers. As someone who has been a public servant his whole career and who has led public servants, what I know is public servants, police officers, law enforcement, they don't sign up for the money. There's actually a lot better and more, things that'll pay you more that you could do with your life than being a police officer. People sign up to be public servants because they want to serve, right? They want to do a very specific job, right, in terms of police, which is working big and interesting investigations. They want to solve murders and homicides. They want to chase, put their bodies in the way of violence. But what they're doing right now is not that. And I attribute this to the low morale and what must be changed, and why it's related to our other conversations about homelessness and about poverty. Because 2 weeks ago, there was an encampment across the way from our office right here. There's two people, their shopping carts and whatever stuff. Someone called them in. 5 police APD units responded. 2 solid waste units responded. And they were out there for a good hour. They were fine. They were perfectly respectful. The situation never escalated, right? They were very friendly. They spoke with us. They spoke with them. But at the end of the day, that's not what they signed up to do. That is not the job that they envisioned when they put on the badge. Right? And if you spend your day doing a thing you didn't sign up to do, you're not going to be happy with your job either, right? Same thing goes for some of the proposals from my opponents who are enforcing all low-level crimes, right? Cops didn't sign up to give jaywalking tickets, right? Like, they signed up to go investigate serious crimes. My proposal is we let them do that. We need to pull all of these calls that are mental health related, that are addiction related, that are poverty related, away from them so they can focus their limited resources on the calls that matter. I would also say, though, we need them not just to focus on the serious crimes, but on building relationships with community. You talked earlier about sort of the trust of the community, how important that is to policing functioning. What that looks like from the police side is having police in the community and getting to know people as people, not just people who they're chasing or putting cuffs on, right? That's not the same thing as sweeping them from the streets. What it means is them being integrated into communities so they know the people there and know their issues. And so that people know them and know their faces. And know that the number 911 is you can trust when you call it, because there is someone out there in a uniform who you know, who cares about you and your community. This is the thing I did as U.S. attorney. We're talking about serving our tribal and Pueblo nations. Right? So we're the primary investigators and prosecutors for our 23 tribes and pueblos. We expanded the number of prosecutors working on tribal territory and expanded their responsibilities, right? Not just prosecution, but also going and building relationships with the governors, the police chiefs, and the people of the tribes. That way, when something happened, right, they could overcome the centuries of distrust, earned distrust, from our United States government because they knew somebody, because somebody had been there, because they believed that there was a person who cared about their community and serving them. And so I think, and by the way, there's an ancillary benefit to this too. If you think, you asked me before about sort of dealing with the trauma of these hard jobs, the way you do it is by decompressing from them. Because if all you see every day is the worst, right, that affects how you treat people and it affects your ability to do the job. If you get to then work in community and be with people, see the best, right? See the products of your work, which is a safe community. Yeah. That resets your brain. That helps you deal with the trauma. That helps you manage this job that's impossible and difficult and hard, and build trust with the community.
Yeah, police officers want to feel like they're actually making a difference, and they have a mayor's office that actually has their back.
Right.
In the good and bad scenarios.
Absolutely.
So I completely agree. I want to be conscious of your time. One last point I want to get on is, so an issue in Albuquerque when it comes to running a campaign is not a lot of people vote. The last governor election, I think only 47% of registered Democrats voted. About 38% of registered Republicans voted in the last presidential election. Numbers were slightly higher, but they were about the same. And I didn't look at the last mayoral election results.
There's a little over 100,000 people voted out of the 500,000 that live here.
It sounds about right.
Yeah.
So it's a two-pronged approach, I'd imagine, from your point of view. You're going against someone who has name recognition, and for whatever reason, this is not just an Albuquerque problem. I think this is an American problem where people will vote more based on the name recognition than they do results. That's your first issue. And then your second issue is just getting people in general to go out and vote. I've noticed that you're building a good relationship with the young people of Albuquerque, which I think is very important. So what is your approach to building name recognition and mobilizing people to vote?
Yeah, I think this is a part of the bigger project that's in front of all of us in this democracy. The thing that hurts me the most when I'm out talking with people is people who say I don't vote. right? Because you and I know that people have died for this right. And you and I know that this is also the key to building the community, the city, the state, the nation that we deserve. Is people invested in picking leaders who will do the right thing for the community. And so I've focused a lot on young voters because if you look at 2024 federal, presidential election, the biggest voting bloc was 65 plus, right? And we are facing big generational issues and problems, and we have to be providing generational solutions for young people. And so if you're not speaking to young people, right, then you are not building the future for them, for us, right, for beyond us. And we spent a lot of time, we went to UNM multiple times, just talking with kids, just talking with students. We did a voter registration on the 7th, so the first day of early voting, we were out doing a voter registration. Because we believe it's so important that folks know that there's an election, know that their voice in it matters, and know exactly how a city affects their day-to-day life, right? Because folks will always start with, well, I don't like to get into politics. But my follow-up question is always, if there's one thing you could change about this city, what would it be? And everyone has an answer to that. And if you've got an answer to that, you've got it in investment in what happens this November 4th. And I think that's a great point. I was really proud to just get the endorsement of the Young Democrats here in New Mexico. And I think that the youth are our future. And if we are not looking at their future, then we're not building a future.
No, I completely agree. We do have a couple minutes, so I want to give this point to you so you can explain it as much as you can in the short time we have left. Mentioned a little bit earlier, you have a whole page on your website about the investigation into Keller. Going across a lot of different things that are going on in his administration, from the asbestos issue in Gateway that was at best not looked into enough, at worst known and just not cared about. The amount of money that was taken away from the child care programs and then given as bonuses. What is your progress right now? What are you looking into with the mayor? What is your progress? And then what is the end goal? Because I think a lot of people, when they look at a lot of these issues, like, we need to get to the bottom of this.
Sure.
And it's like, okay, well, now what? So what's the end goal with all of that?
The end goal comes back to the thing we were talking before, which
Sorry,
is...
what are you looking into first?
Yeah, okay.
So
we can talk about what's going on, and I'll step back structurally to say that we have an inspector general, or we did, whose responsibility, as every government agency should, whose responsibility it is to make sure things are being done right. Right, very simply. We had an inspector general who produced a report about the Gateway Center and said, look, we bought this 1950s building. We knew that we knew it has asbestos in it, and silica and lead. Right, we know it because there was at least one test that happened in there. And we know it just because every 1950s building is common sense, has asbestos.
Right.
And so when we put hundreds of workers in there without PPE and without abating it first, we put all of their lives in danger. And by the way, all of their families too. Right? And so when you do that, that's bad. And that's what the Inspector General found. And we want to know a number of things about how this was handled. And we also, more importantly, want the people of Albuquerque to have answers before they go to the polls. Because I think it's really important in judging this administration and its actions that they know whether or not they created an entirely new generation of downwinders with asbestos poisoning. And so that is the heart of why we are asking questions. But it goes back to a bigger thing too, right? Like one of my proudest accomplishments as United States Attorney was taking down 30 years of corruption in Albuquerque's police department. When we are not self-monitoring, when our government is failing its people, is when they lose belief in it. And that's when they stop voting, right? That's when they stop believing that 911 will lead to a response that will help them. And so as leaders, it's our responsibility to ensure and pursue every one of these allegations of impropriety, no matter what it is, so that we can assure the public that it is happening, so that they can trust their government. That's not what happened here. When this report came out, and the ARPA report that you're describing about COVID money that was moved from the frontline providers it was supposed to go to people who sat behind doors and put total safety during COVID, the Inspector General was placed on administrative leave with 6 reports to go. 6 reports we haven't seen.
When they came out and they responded to it, they said that the Inspector General's office didn't have the jurisdiction to investigate.
Then who does?
So what does that mean?
It means it's a symptom of an administration trying to dodge responsibility. Because someone must have the responsibility of checking our leaders and our governments and making sure they're being done right and telling us where the issues are so we can fix them, not bury them.
I completely agree, because I come from a military background when it comes to inspector generals, and I don't know how it works, just to be completely honest, in government, but in the military, your inspector general, while yes, they are a part of the military, they're an officer in the military, they're not a part of the chain of command.
Right.
They're a third-party individual that investigates issues in the chain of command or in the whatever shop is going on or whatever it is. They are supposed to be a third-party entity, non-biased, looking into the thing.
Same in Department of Justice. We have Office Inspector General,
Right.
and there's a completely independent Office of Special Counsel.
So,
Right.
so when you have that in government and you hear from that department saying, well, we don't have jurisdiction to investigate this, feel free to correct me, but I look at that as, oh, this is governmental pressure from the office that's getting investigated to tell them to shut their mouths until this problem goes away.
So I asked the mayor straight up at a forum maybe a month ago why the inspector general was put on administrative leave. He did not answer that question in front of a crowd of 400 people.
What did he say?
He said, well, when you build things, there's going to be asbestos in it. That's just how things are. And, we got a letter that says that we could spend ARPA money. That was his response.
Has anybody asked him publicly about how people in his departments got the bonuses they did when the money went away?
His answer is that he has a letter saying he could do it.
Sick. Okay.
Because, it begs the question, right, with that is like, even if you have a letter saying it, these funds are for people who are putting their personal safety and health on the line so they can take care of our children.
Right.
And even if you have a letter saying you can do it, why?
Right.
Why would you?
God, just because the answers that we get from the guy, and I'm glad this didn't turn into it, but I didn't want to make this a Bash and Keller session because you just look at the results of the city. Personally, I think that's enough.
I agree.
But I saw he got asked about, I think it was on a PBS thing he did or something, where he got asked about the asbestos issue. Mm-hmm. And his answer was, well, I was one of the people that might have gotten exposed to the asbestos. It was like, oh, well, that's not an answer. That's a non-answer. Well, so shouldn't you have a vested interest in making sure this was done properly? But anyway.
He also referred to them as Republican talking points.
Right.
Which is also not a response.
It's not a response. It's like, okay, well then you're either calling a group of people that have to either vote or not vote for you. You're calling them liars or deceptive or whatever. Or you're saying the Republican Party isn't good enough to investigate issues. Or then why just politicize problems anyway? Because asbestos doesn't have a political party. Like, why? It's just...
Asbestos is bad last time I checked.
Exactly.
I think we can agree on that, bipartisan.
Exactly. Yeah, 100%. And then it's the same issue as well whenever he gets asked about immigration issues or just bigger picture issues that affect Albuquerque. It's, we're going to fight the Trump administration. I promise you that Albuquerque has had major issues that are getting worse before the guy got into office. Mm-hmm. Donald Trump is not the reason Albuquerque is bad.
Yeah, I think we need to be sure that we are not distracted by political rhetoric that pits us against each other.
I agree.
I've criticized both parties consistently on this point, which is if the basis of your power, if the basis of your reelection is pointing a finger at somebody else and saying they're the enemy, then you are not making our community stronger.
I agree. You've immediately just lost the whole point of the issue.
And so for me, what it is understanding that we are not as divided as the politicians tell us that we are.
I agree.
We don't have to choose battle lines based on where they draw them. We can choose things that make sense and are common sense and are solutions that work for working class people. We have them here, and we don't need to rely on a party to do that.
It's a great way to end the podcast, man. I think more people need to hear that.
I believe it.
Well, I appreciate your time.
Thank
you. I really
you.
do. I know you're a busy guy.
Yeah.
I appreciate you sitting down to do this. Before we get out of here, where can everyone, this will be out on Monday, where can everyone find you, both on your website, social media? How can they support you? And then, is there a debate coming up?
There's a debate coming up on the 15th.
Okay, so the 15th
KOAT.
is Wednesday or Monday?
Wednesday?
It's Wednesday, right? Okay, so this will be out the Monday prior.
Okay.
So and Just where people find you, and then where can people watch the debate, both in person or online?
Sure. I'll start. They're not airing the debates, or they're not having an audience for the debate.
Okay.
So they can't watch it in person. I know. But you'll be able to watch it. I think I'm not sure when they're airing it. Is it? Do y'all know if it's being aired? Who knows? I don't know. Simultaneously, I don't know.
Well,
I would assume
sure
that
you're
they
going to
are.
advertise it if it's aired.
Yeah,
So
yeah, for sure. We'll put it up. But anyways, if you want to find more information about me, you can go to alexforalbuquerque.com. You can stop by here at our campaign headquarters. We're here every day. We're here on 411 Bellama between 4th and 5th. And so go to my website. I also do a virtual meet and greet every Monday night because I believe in transparency and accessibility from our leaders. And so you can log on Zoom, ask me any question. I've been doing it for months because there's a lot of questions from people in this election, and people deserve to have someone who is willing to address their questions directly and honestly.
awesome. And then people can vote now. There is
Early voting started on the 7th of October.
Okay.
And so they can go in and same day register and vote at the clerk's annex now, and then on the 18th in more places. And then the election is on November 4th. But I think it's the most important thing is to get out and vote. And if you're a voter already, get out and tell friends, tell family, take them to the polls, because 20% of our community is not enough to determine its future.
I agree. Well, again, thank you, Alex. Thank you for your time. Thank you, everyone, for listening and watching, and we'll see you next time. Bye,
Thank you.
everybody.
Appreciate you.
Beautiful.